Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really digging into a fascinating and pretty profound text, Mark chapter 11.
Absolutely. It's a chapter just packed with action.
Right, and surprising insights too. Our mission today really is to unpack all those layers of meaning, focusing especially on Jesus' authority, how it was shown, how it got challenged, and, what it actually means for us today.
And it's such a rich chapter for that. The source material we're looking at, it's this really detailed study of Mark 11, and it gives just a unique view into those incredibly intense final days of Jesus right before the crucifixion. So as we get into this narrative, you'll start to see these powerful connections, really resonant links between, ancient events and these timeless truths about faith, obedience, and something really critical, perception versus true spiritual substance.
Okay, let's start peeling back those layers then. Beginning with Jesus' entrance into Jerusalem, which, as our source makes clear, wasn't just some casual walk into town. It was, a declaration, wasn't it? A kingly one.
Very much so.
So picture this. Jesus and the disciples, they're getting close to Jerusalem near Beit Gai and Beit Anya, right there by the Mount of Olives. And Jesus gives this seemingly simple instruction to two disciples.
Yeah, go into the village, find a colt tied up, one that's never been ridden, untie it, bring it here. Sounds straightforward enough.
Exactly, but the source really emphasizes this little detail. It's loaded with meaning.
Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating because this was no, ordinary errand. Our study shows that Jesus riding this specific animal, a donkey's foal, was a direct, unmistakable signal to the leadership in Jerusalem.
He wasn't just arriving.
No, he was arriving as their king, deliberately fulfilling scripture. The prophecy in Zechariah 9:9 about the king coming humble and mounted on a donkey.
On a colt, the foal of a donkey.
Right, exactly. It's a clear statement, and it's deliberately contrasting with maybe the expectation of some conquering hero on a war horse.
Yeah.
He's embodying peace, not military power.
And what really jumps out is how the disciples react, or rather how they don't react. They don't question it.
Not at all.
They just believe him and go.
Yeah.
Even when people nearby challenge them, like, hey, what are you doing untying that colt? They just give the answer Jesus told them to give.
The Lord needs it.
And that's it. They let them take it. This shows a huge shift in their faith, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
After all the times they seemed confused or doubtful, what's different here?
That's a really excellent point. Because, they definitely had their moments of, let's say, confusion earlier on.
For sure.
But our source suggests that by this point, seeing his authority demonstrated again and again, it had really cemented their trust. This specific moment, it kind of illustrates that balance,
Yeah.
There's a time for asking honest questions, absolutely. But there's also a time for, humble submission when you get a clear instruction from the Lord. The commentary makes a point. If Jesus is truly Lord, then obedience follows.
It's not blind obedience, though.
No, exactly. It's trust built on past experience, on seeing his wisdom, his power. And that trust, it prepares us for what's coming next. Because he does know what's ahead. It's an active kind of trust.
Okay, so Jesus gets the colt, and as he rides toward the city, the reaction from the crowd is just incredible. People are throwing their robes on the road, spreading branches.
Classic signs of honoring royalty. Submission, really.
And again, that detail about the donkey meaning peace, contrasting with a horse meaning war.
Yeah.
It's a peaceful entry, but it's also kind of subversive, given what people expected the Messiah to be like.
And shouting, Hosanna!
Yeah.
Our study dives into that word. Originally, it meant something quite urgent, like, save us now, or please deliver us.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but by this time, it had sort of evolved into this passionate shout of praise, of adoration, a joyous welcome. And they're quoting Psalm 118 too. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. Hosanna in the highest.
So it's acknowledging both earthly praise and heavenly blessing.
Precisely. As he rides in as their king. It's just dripping with prophetic significance.
So after all this amazing procession, what's the first thing Jesus does when he actually gets into Jerusalem, into the temple courts?
He just looks around.
Right. He takes a good look at everything. That's it.
Yeah.
No big speech right then, no dramatic action, just observing, just scrutinizing maybe.
Seems like it. Then he heads back to Beit Anya with the 12. It feels like purely a declaration, planting his flag almost, asserting ownership before the storm hits.
Okay, so day one is this powerful, peaceful declaration. He establishes his presence. But then the next morning, as they head back into the city, things take a very different turn, don't they?
They do. The focus shifts sharp.
Yeah, it goes from that grand entry to a really pointed message, starting with, strangely enough, a tree.
That's right. Jesus is hungry, sees a fig tree off in the distance, and it's in leaf. Now, our source notes this was unusual for the time of year.
Figs usually come after the leaves.
Generally, yes, or at least the beginnings of them should be there if the leaves are fully out, so this tree looked promising, but deceptively so.
And this seemingly random detail about a fig tree. It's not just about breakfast, is it?
Oh, not at all. It's incredibly profound. Our analysis shows that even though it wasn't peak fig season, the tree was, as the source puts it, all decked out like it was time. Lots of leaves, looking healthy, but zero fruit, not even buds.
So it's an image of outward show.
Exactly. Outward show, but no inner substance. It looked the part, promised sustenance, but was actually barren. And this isn't just about ancient agriculture. It's a potent symbol. A warning, maybe.
About spiritual life.
Yeah, about spiritual barrenness that's maybe hiding behind, religious appearances. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Where might we be putting on a show of full leaves, church attendance, saying the right things, but lacking the actual fruit of genuine love, service, transformation?
Authenticity over appearance.
That's the core of it, yeah.
So that powerful image hangs in the air. And then Jesus enters Jerusalem again, the second time. And this time, his action is immediate. And pretty dramatic.
Yes, confrontational.
He goes straight to the temple courts, specifically the outer court, the one meant for the Gentiles, right?
The court of the Gentiles, yes. Yeah. And he starts driving out people doing business there, overturning the money changers' tables, the benches of those selling doves.
This wasn't just like asking them to quiet down?
No, this was a full-on disruption, a direct challenge to the whole economic and, frankly, religious setup there.
Why? What was the core issue?
Well, our study really emphasizes it wasn't about condemning business itself. Trade had its place, but this was the wrong place, and it seems it was exploitative. He quotes Isaiah, remember, "My house will be called a house of prayer for all the goyim." That means all nations, Gentiles included, not just for Jewish people. And then he adds, "But you have made it into a den of robbers."
Strong words.
Very. It's about justice, about access for everyone, about the temple's true purpose. Those money changers, often charging unfair exchange rates. The dove sellers, likely price gouging pilgrims who needed sacrifices.
So it had become exclusive and exploitative instead of inclusive and prayerful.
Exactly. And the source makes a really pointed observation. It makes you wonder what Jesus might think if he walked into some churches today. Places where maybe commerce or entertainment has overshadowed the focus on prayer and connecting with God.
Bookstores, coffee shops.
Right. It raises that challenging question. What should a house of prayer truly be? A place for genuine connection with God, for everyone, free from barriers and exploitation.
And the reaction to this very public, very authoritative act.
Immediate and hostile, from the leadership anyway.
Yeah.
The head priests, the Kohanim, and the Torah teachers, the scribes. They immediately start looking for a way to, get rid of him.
Because they were afraid.
Deeply afraid. Afraid of losing their positions, their control, their influence. Because, as the text says, the crowds were utterly taken by his teaching. For them, it wasn't a theological disagreement anymore.
It was a threat.
A direct threat to their power base.
Okay, so that's day 2. They're moving into the third morning. They're heading back into Jerusalem again, and Peter notices something.
Yeah, Peter spots the fig tree from the day before.
Yeah.
And he's clearly amazed, maybe a little excited even. He points out that it's withered up all the way to its roots.
He's still focused on the kind of the raw power display.
Yeah.
The miracle itself.
Which is understandable. It was a pretty dramatic sight. But
Yeah.
Jesus, he always uses these moments to teach something deeper.
Right.
He uses Peter's observation to explain the meaning behind the withered tree. Our study explains it was a living picture of those religious leaders.
Almost putting on a show.
Exactly. A show of serving God, but in reality it was only a show. They had the leaves, the outward appearance of piety, but no actual spiritual fruit. And the commentary links this directly to what Jesus says later in Revelation to the church in Laodicea about being lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, lacking genuine spiritual life. It's a really stark warning about authenticity.
And then Jesus pivots, doesn't he?
Yeah.
From the symbol to the spiritual lesson for Peter, for all of them.
He does. He says, have the kind of trust that comes from God. And then he makes that absolutely astounding statement about faith moving a mountain into the sea.
Which sounds like hyperbole, but maybe isn't.
Well, he's establishing this radical principle, isn't he, about active God-given trust. The insight here, maybe, is that this mountain-moving faith isn't about us having immense willpower. It's about aligning our trust so completely with God's will.
That our prayers become part of his purpose.
Something like that, yeah. The mountain could be any huge obstacle in our lives. And Jesus is saying the real power isn't in our commanding ability, but in fully trusting the one who can command.
Wow, okay. And that leads into his teaching on prayer itself.
A truly profound teaching. He says, whatever you ask for in prayer, trust that you are receiving it and it will be yours. Incredible promise. But then comes the condition, the really challenging part.
Forgiveness.
Right. Immediately after that promise, he adds, and when you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, so that your Father in heaven may also forgive your offenses.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Linking answered prayer directly to our willingness to forgive others.
It is huge.
Yeah.
And our source even suggests this might have been particularly relevant for the disciples right then, remembering that spat they had about James and John wanting the best seats in the kingdom.
Right. Bad feelings lingering.
Possibly. And this idea the study mentions about forgiveness being like an identification card signifying we're children of God, that's powerful too.
Meaning true forgiveness is maybe only possible through God's power.
It implies that, doesn't it? It suggests it's not just about trying harder to let it go. It's potentially a supernatural act. Which makes you ask yourself, doesn't it, what bitterness might I be holding on to that's actually blocking my own connection with God despite, all my other efforts?
That is a deeply challenging thought. And uncomfortable.
Definitely.
So all this teaching about faith, prayer, forgiveness, it sets the stage for the final confrontation in this chapter. Jesus is back in the temple courts, third trip in, and he's met by the leadership coalition.
The ones who want him gone. The head priests, the Torah teachers, the elders, all together now.
And they confront him directly. They corner him, demanding to know about his authority.
What smika do you have? What's that word, smika?
It means authority, ordination, divine permission, basically. Like, who gave you the right?
Right. Who gave you the smika, authorizing you to do these things? They want his credentials.
And Jesus just brilliantly turns it back on them with a question they can't answer honestly without condemning themselves.
The question about John the Baptist. Exactly. John's baptism, was it from heaven or from a human source? Answer me.
And they're trapped.
Completely. Our study lays out their dilemma perfectly. If they say John's authority was from heaven, they have to accept his testimony about Jesus, which validates Jesus and wrecks their own position.
But if they say John was just some guy,
then they risk the crowd turning on them because everyone considered John a true prophet.
so they hedge.
They give that non-answer, we don't know, which, as the source points out, wasn't ignorance, it was pure politics.
Protecting themselves.
Protecting their power, their reputation,
Right.
over discovering or admitting the truth. It just exposes their motives, really. A timeless human weakness, maybe. Choosing expediency over truth.
So quite a journey through just one chapter. We've seen these incredible displays of Jesus' authority, the kingly entry, the temple cleansing, the power over nature, his profound teaching.
And alongside that, the deep challenges about what real faith looks like, the absolute necessity of forgiveness, and that stark contrast between, religious show and actual spiritual fruit.
Packed. So many transformative moments.
Indeed. And it really does invite us, doesn't it, to think about how these ancient lessons still hit home today. Like, how do we figure out what true authority looks like in our own life, spiritual, moral, whatever?
Mm-hmm.
What does it actually mean to cultivate that kind of trust that comes from God? The kind that can tackle the mountains in our own lives, maybe not literal ones, but the emotional, spiritual obstacles.
And that forgiveness piece.
Yeah, and how willing are we really to forgive like that, knowing how deeply it's tied to our own spiritual well-being and our ability to connect with God? These aren't just academic questions, are they? They're invitations to change.
So as we finish up this deep dive, maybe just take a moment, you listening, to think about that contrast again. The disciples on their journey, starting with questions, ending, at least in moments like the cult incident, with trust and obedience, versus the leaders, outwardly religious, but driven by politics, by fear, by self-preservation.
It's a stark contrast.
It really is. So when is it right, even vital, to ask the hard questions, to really probe and understand? Jesus certainly invited that sometimes. But when, as we see with the disciples, is it maybe time for that humble, trusting obedience based on what God has already shown us? How does our own view of authority, where we think it comes from, how we react to it, how does that shape our ability to actually receive truth and then act on it in our own lives? Something to chew on as you continued your own exploration.